Hey guys, this is Eric Vento. Welcome to another podcast of Government to Private. Here with us today, we have Chuck Andrews, or Friends of Chuck. He's a myth and legend in the corporate security world. He's laughing, but it's true. He's been around a really long time, and it's fantastic to have him here because the breadth and the scope of what Chuck represents to the corporate security world and the impact that he's had on people who are coming out of law enforcement and the government in general is simply immeasurable. And so, Chuck, thank you so much for joining us today.
Good to be here, Eric, and love the show, and looking forward to get into some little transition talk today.
Absolutely, brother. So for those of you who don't know you and aren't familiar with your body of work and your background, can you just give us a high level overview of your government experience and, start to transition into when you knew it was time to get out?
Oh, absolutely. I got to give a little foundation, right? And
Let's do it.
My book covers a lot of this as well, but I started as a police explorer. I started working for the government when I was 13 years old for free, right? Volunteering as a law enforcement police explorer, which is a division of the Boy Scouts of America. I was a Cub Scout Weebelo, but I said, I want to be a Boy Scout, man. I want to go out on patrol. I want to put on my Bianchi belt, all my equipment in uniform. I want to go ride around till 3 a.m. at the age of 13, chasing bad guys, right? That's exactly how it all started for me. And then I had a great career, through law enforcement, got to do everything, but my mindset was very different because of the baseline and exposure I had from the age of 13 to 19, logging 4,000 hours, sitting in a police car, doing police business. Turns out the police business is the people business, and the people business is the relationship business. And that's where the basis of so much of what I did back then is today, and everything that I apply and do. So I did it pretty much all in law enforcement, but I was also an entrepreneur in parallel with being a law enforcement officer. Instead of, I knew where I was going and what I wanted to do at such a young age. Most people don't. I knew exactly what I wanted to do, and that's leave a life of public service. I'm still a law enforcement officer today. I'm a Texas Master Peace Officer. I'm going into my 41st year. Right? So I'm old, Eric.
You don't look old, Chuck. You don't look old, brother.
Well, listen, this is all about deoxyribonucleic cowboy acid, right? DNA. C.
Hey man, if I can look the way you do at your age, I'll be doing really good for myself, man.
When I was younger, I looked younger, and I even remember going in for an interview one time because I was worthy of this leadership role. So I put a little chalk in my hair. I still don't have any gray today except in my beard, right? So it's bode well as I aged. I digress. So look, I got to do the chief of police thing, the chief security officer thing, and eventually I went and built my world, Friends of Chuck. So that transition, though, from a government law enforcement setting, right? Unlike most people, I already started that process, and I encourage other people that are going to leave a government setting and move into a private corporate setting. I started that 25 years in parallel with my government role. So I was a consultant, right, for a publicly traded pawn shop operation a long time ago, while I was a law enforcement guy, right? That was my off-duty job. I got to do loss prevention. I got to advise on innovation and technology, crime prevention, law enforcement tools. So my transition was very intentional. And that is what is missing as you transition from the government law enforcement setting into the private sector. You have to do it today, or as we say in Mexico, hoy. So because it's muy importante, okay? So that's how my journey is different, because I paid attention to all the little things, and that hasn't changed today. And I do 60, 70 things in parallel in my life, and that's the way my head rolls, and my processes that I built to support me. That's why I can do the work of a lot of people, right? Because I just built these systems and processes. So the bottom line is start early in your transition while you're in the government setting. Go to ASIS chapter meetings, fraud association meetings, get your certification, start networking with those people. If your agency will allow you to freelance off duty, do consulting work based on departmental policy, go do it and meet those people and understand, because in the private industry, we call it risk. In law enforcement, we call it crime. You need to understand the delta between the two, right? From a business perspective. Find mentors like me and other people, right, who can help give you advice and direction in that space. So it's usually about a 2-hour conversation to explain all the stuff that I've done. And but for purposes of today, we have compressed this zip file.
I really like what you said about the delta between, risk and crime. And, it's something I really harp on to every single person I talk to, is knowing how to articulate your government experience into what matters to the corporate world.
Absolutely.
It's literally the difference between potentially getting an interview versus just ghosted, because you may, and this is what I deal with a lot of people who are coming out of federal law enforcement in particular, especially at the executive level, is, man, I have all this amazing experience, but it's like no one understands me. And that's exactly it, is you do have all this amazing experience. It's just in a different language, and, just what you said, relationship building, attending ASIS or ACFE or any number of these other chapter organizations that you may be interested in will hopefully enable you to build those relationships with people who are already in the private sector and can help you with articulating those skill sets. Because every single skill that you have in law enforcement is translatable. It's just helping people understand who don't have that background.
You're absolutely right. Translation, right? And so think of it as going from Python to C++, right? If you will, you have to pay attention and understand the code and decode, crypt and encrypt, right? To be able to translate that to problem solving, because you're in the same business. Doesn't matter if it's government or private, right? It's semantics. So you have to pay attention. So you want to be a part of this culture, hang around the culture, build the relationships with those people, go to those events in that industry, but do it in parallel with what you're doing now. If your agency want to let you do that, then find out what they will let you do that, how much you can get away with, to be honest with you. And I come from the school of ask for forgiveness. Right? So you're dead on. And so that translation is really important, but start early. So you're ahead of the game. You have a plan, you have a contingency through this strategy.
Obviously everyone's journey is different, and every single transition process is very unique. We have the unicorns who they throw a couple of applications out there, they get hired. They're by far the exception and not the norm. For most people, especially in today's job market.
Let me stop
Go
you.
ahead.
That unicorn is 0.001 basis points. It is an outlier.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
So I'm glad I know where you're going with this. So keep going, because I got some commentary on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for most people, especially in today's job market, it's taking 6 to 9 months, and that's going through multiple interview processes. That's learning how to not only articulate your impact on paper, but also verbally in an interview process.
Right.
And so many other things. Like I tell people all the time, in order to get a job nowadays, it takes doing a lot of things consistently well. And that kind of sucks, for a lot of people who have spent 30 years at the top of their game, but at the same time, if you can master the consistency of this process, then you're doing far better than the majority of people out there.
The word you're looking for is maintenance. It's the hardest thing in the world. I talk about it in my book, yes, sir, right? Maintenance is the most important thing. You can invent something, makes a new process. The maintenance of said, whatever it is you come up with, that's the hard part. If you can master that, as you say, consistency, you got to have it. And you have to be consistent over that as part of the time. Maintenance is tough, but it turns out it's the most important thing that you can actually do. And in regards to getting a job, and I don't know when I'm going to release this, but I did a study, and it's gonna shake up the human resources world. You know, the HR has a group called SHRM, right? Great group. But the challenge of getting a job. I fill out an application. I spend an hour. Then I have a resume, and I work on that. Best CV in the world. Well, your life and death decisions are based on OCR, optical character recognition and keyword recognition, based on that going through. Do you want to leave to that kind of chance, the opportunity? Because your whole goal is to get the interview.
Right.
Get the interview so you can go back to being human again and interface with people so they can read your body language. They can listen to your tone. Down to the modulation of what comes out of your mouth and your face and your arms and gestures. All of this incorporates into decision-making to go to the next level. You just have to, Eric, you just have to get to the interview. That is driven by relationships. That's where success is. You're going to have to know somebody who can help you, vouch for you, coach you, direct you, tell you more importantly what not to say as opposed to say, just so you can get to the interview. But that CV, that resume is not going to get you there. Long story short, I spent a year last year in 2022, and I applied for 10 CSO jobs. I qualify, and I only qualified if I met the criteria 95% or better. Some of these jobs paid $400, $500, $600, $700, $800,000. I don't know. And probably the lowest job was a $100,000 job. Now, my background and experience in the law enforcement industry, which I'm still in, and the security industry is, I did pretty good. I worked hard, have 3 degrees. I've studied overseas in Europe, the criminal justice systems of 5 countries. I've done a ton of stuff in this business. Could I run a Fortune 10 or Fortune 50 as a CSO? No question. So I had to make sure I didn't get one interview. Not one. You got to wonder why that's the case. And I did that to prove a point. Someone who's qualified from a $100,000 security manager job to a security director to a chief security officer to a senior vice president and CSO of a Fortune 50 or Fortune 100. I've had those roles in the past. I knew that I qualified, but I could not get an interview. And all I did was just submit the application like everybody else. So I wanted to run a real world litmus test on this to remind people that relationships are key to help you get there. That's where the rubber meets the road, because your CV, resume, and I'm going to publish this, and I'm going to do a whole show on this and talk in depth about this. When I was a CSO and I was hiring people, I tried to keep HR out of it as much as possible and as allowed. There are people in this country who are gifted and talented. They didn't need to go to college. And they look, they're Mensa people, right? Extremely talented for the role. But HR told me, hey, we're going to divide up and give you all the people with a bachelor's degree or a master's. I said, no, I want them all. I want them all. Right. And as a result, I hired people that did not have a bachelor's degree, and they were the best candidate for the job for the corporate mission, and particularly the security or investigations department. So you got to know people, you got to build those relationships. That's what's going to get you. The goal is to get to the interview, and that's where the work begins. And you need a good coach and mentor to help you. I'll be releasing this soon, probably after ASIS GSX and Texas night on Sunday. Right?
I'm looking forward to that, because that's definitely something I've always wondered about, but I'm always curious as well, because the hiring process for a lot of companies is just broken, and
I just proved it.
yeah,
I just proved it. The value that I can bring to a company. I mean, I speak P&L, I speak EBITDA, I speak engineering, criminal justice, private security. I have every certification you could pretty much have, right? All completely effing worthless on paper. Through your life is dictated, your opportunity is dictated by optical character recognition. What kind of bullshit is that? Right?
yeah, that's something.
It's unfair.
Yeah, it is. And that's something I bring up with all of the clients and a lot of people that I just talked to, like we're having a conversation here, is, I've had 6 jobs since coming out of law enforcement. I've been laid off 4 times. But 4 out of those 6 jobs came from someone reaching out to me proactively and saying, hey, I think you'd be a good fit for this. Are you interested in having a conversation? Only 2 of those came from me just, prayer, send off the application, didn't know anyone whatsoever to get a referral, but there's so many nuances to the hiring process. Like maybe they already have someone in mind internally. Maybe that job
here.
isn't even open,
like 3 of these roles, they already had people already slated. This was just to protect them legally.
Yeah. And that's why it's so important to know people, because then you can reach out and they can say, well, hey, I actually talked to the hiring manager and that job's already filled, man. So don't even bother wasting your time on it. Yep. And obviously you can, at the end of the day, you can only do what you have control over. If you reach out to people and you leverage your network and you still can't find anyone, okay, you've done your due diligence, tailor your resume, send it off and hope for the best. But
all you can do.
If you talk to anyone who's been successful in the transition process, never say never, but every single person I know has gotten to where they are as a result of their relationships and their ability to build intentional relationships.
It's human. And you got to go back to the basis of that, right? So ultimately, when people call me, I have probably 200 resumes right here that I keep people in mind. Friends of Chuck is out there to help people in that respect, constantly finding jobs. But when I call somebody and I call a CSO, or it's usually a CSO that I know, and say, hey, you should interview this person because I understand their character, personality, and emotional intelligence. And it's a good fit. The rest of it they can learn, or they have the ability to learn, or they already know. And they would jive well with the CSO or whoever, right? Sometimes CSOs listen to me, sometimes they don't. Several of them have come back to me and said, you're right, Chuck. Didn't work out. People said, Chuck, you should be a headhunter. I said, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not what the whole Friends of Chuck mantra is all about. I will tell you that someone did pay me. He's a dear friend of mine. But he literally, short of a fight, stuffed a check in my shirt jacket and took me to a $250 dinner. That was a lot in 1990. We got into an argument, but he came from a school where that's what you do. And so I can actually say I've only taken, not by choice, but force majeure, right? And he's a dear friend today. Whatever he needs, I try to help him, and along with 150,000 other people and Friends of Chuck.
So, you bring up FOC, for those of the people who are going to be listening to this call, what is that?
Well, hopefully, poof, the logo pops up right in the middle of your show. Anyway, so, maybe 10, 14 years ago, I knew I'd transition out of corporate America into doing my own thing, because corporate America is stifling. you really, you get to a point where you don't meet the Friends of Chuck mantra, dream big, know how to have fun, get shit done. Right. And that's makes people feel good if you can do those things. Right. So literally a friend of mine, Mike, he was a New York cop, Texas cop, and then he became a chief security officer. And then he's a Disney guy, right? He's part of these adults, right, that still go to Disney 2 or 3 times a year. So he comes from that school and he's actually been Disney trained. So his whole life, really, he was an entrepreneur and a marketing and branding guy. And now they have this big company. And he and his son, within 2 days, came up with this concept. And it starts like this. So we used to all gather in Houston, a whole bunch of CSOs, and we get together monthly and solve the world's problems. When we get together, I get harassed and say, oh, Chuck, I was having a drink in Dubai. And the guy asked me, where are you from? He goes, yeah, Houston, Texas, oil, gas capital of the world. Hey, you know that Chuck Andrews guy with that black hat? You know that? And then I get a text, from these guys. They come back and say, how do you create all this connectivity? Well, while we're sitting at the table, someone said, hey, Friends of Chuck, like literally, it's just how it all came about. And there's more to the story. As an adjunct professor at Sam Houston State University, my alma mater, I was teaching. I sent my friend Frank up there. Students, go Bearcats, right? Go Cats. And they got into like, where's Professor Andrews? Where's Mr. Andrews? Blah, blah, blah. And he goes, this is not about this, is about Frank. I'm here to teach today. And this is Friends of Frank. And then somebody says, Friends of Chuck. And then Friends of Frank, Friends of Chuck, Friends of Frank. And they come back and he tells me this when we gather. And it's like, within 2 days, Friends of Chuck was born. And I don't know what I'm going to do with it. And it took on a life of its own. And I built it around that mantra. Know how to have fun. Otherwise, what the hell are you doing? Right? Dream big. Because we live in Texas. We don't dream small, people.
Amen.
And we get shit done. People feel good about getting stuff done. They feel good about that. And make sure you're in that environment. That's why I wrote the book that I did. It took me forever. It's very painful to write a book, by the way. Right? And it explains it in there. The book's called Yes, Sir. SIR, Strategy, Intelligence, Relationships. How you two can be a social media, but really a security influencer or an influencer et al. Right? It's all those things. So I just shared in 100 pages. And apparently, if you have enough time, you can say less. That's why it's 100 pages and it took forever. I'm not into reading books with 400 or 500 pages or any of that nonsense. Something that's actionable. You can roll it up, put it in your pocket and go. And that's why I wrote it and made it less than $20. Anyway, that's why I wrote the book, to support what I built. And now I have this huge following and I try to help people as much as I can. And it's based on people and relationships, just like we're talking about, which is the whole point here. Start now. Do not delay. Carpe diem.
Words to live by, brother. I know we're almost out of time, but any other advice that you'd like to provide to our listeners?
Well, listen, ASIS GSX is coming up. What's ASIS GSX? ? ASIS is the world's first, oldest, and largest security association. I think we're coming up on 68, 69 years. I've been a member for 35, served in every position, including the international board. When I was the regional vice president over the great state of Texas, I had to muster and fix our 6 chapters. And the only way to do that is get everybody together, face to face. So I started this thing called Texas Night. We're 9 years into it, 3,000 people. So on September 10th, if you're going to ASIS GSX, I rented 92,000 square feet, AKA Gillies, Mickey Gillies' place, Dallas, Texas. And it's gonna food, Longhorns, armadillo races, Justin Mason band, dance instructors. I want to teach people a few things about Cotton Eye Joe and the 2-step. Thank you. And we got all kinds of stuff. Great sponsors. ProSecure is my title sponsor. Evolve, their gold sponsor, and I have lots of other sponsors. This Thursday, we'll be launching the registration. You got to have a QR code to get in. We're going to kick off ASIS GSX and only the way you could do that in the great state of Texas. Go big or go home.
That's right, brother. Well, hey, I really appreciate that. And, you heard it from Chuck Andrews, ladies and gentlemen. I really hope that, you guys were able to get something out of this. And if you don't take anything else, take this, that, people and relationships are at the core of every single thing that we do. You'll never get more value out of life than by involving others and being intentional about how you approach that process. So, Chuck, thank you so much again for being a part of the podcast today, and best of luck to you, brother.
Thanks. Hey, and don't forget to LinkedIn with me. See y'all.
That's right. See you.